Well, hello with Gratitude Matt listeners. My name is Bill Moran, and I'm Matt's older brother, and today I'll be your host. It's with a heavy heart that I share some news about Matt passing away this past August. Please know that Matt appreciated all of your support, your love, your prayers, and your generosity during his journey. His wife, Mary, and the entire Moran family are so grateful and blessed to have you in our lives and for your continued support. It's really humbling to be presenting here today. Matt always said, with Gratitude Matt was a place that others can come to find the courage to be grateful, regardless of how powerful the storm is. He started his blog, gratitudematt.com, to track his cancer journey. Matt did an amazing and staggering 71 episodes of With Gratitude Matt, and his goal was to reach and inspire more people and help them practice gratitude. I'll introduce our guest in a moment, but today we're going to honor Matt by looking at how he inspired us to find the courage to be grateful, regardless of how powerful his storm was. Today we welcome back Matt's first guest, Dr. Roy Vongtama. Roy is a radiation oncologist, actor, husband, and Matt's friend. Roy is the author of Healing Before You Are Cured. Roy's message of the 4 houses of health helped form a foundation for Matt's journey and his message of gratitude. Matt asks us to develop an attitude of gratitude by being aware of what we feed our mind, body, and soul. Roy, thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Bill. Happy to be here and happy to honor Matt in this way.
Thanks, Roy. So one of the things that, we talked about and you talk about in your book is healing. Why don't you kind of explain for our listeners the difference between healing and being cured?
That's a great question. Healing to me is about an inner journey. It's about inner alignment with what's really there underneath it. And it's something that you do for yourself. It's a journey that you direct, healing, versus curing, which is something you give the power to something outside of you, whether it's, in Matt's case, chemotherapy, surgery, radiation, and you're accepting treatment from the outside, where healing to me is something that you drive, something that you take responsibility for. They both result in the same thing, which is health, hopefully, but one is driven by you and one is driven by others.
So you are a friend of Matt's, you helped Matt in his life, and especially since the diagnosis. What changes in his life and how did you see it manifest itself in his healing journey?
Well, for Matt, it was really powerful. And I do want to acknowledge too, it's very amazing that I did the first episode 71 episodes ago, and now the first episode with you, Bill, and in Matt's honor. So it's kind of like a new start and a bookend to something that's really beautiful and continuing on. So that was the first thing I wanted to say. And looking back to the time with Matt when we first met, I was introduced to him to help him with an integrative look at his cancer, because he just found out that it had become metastatic. So what that means is that it has spread, and he had to come with different ways to look to take care of the situation. And one thing I do with patients and people who want to work with me is to actually look and see where they actually want to start their journey. And my whole system is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. It's coming at it from all 4 aspects in an evidence-based way. And the one that Matt really gravitated toward was the mental. He really, really wanted to master that. And that's where we started. So for him, that healing journey was getting his mind really, really positive. And we, none of us, you nor I, knew how far he was going to take that mental attitude, that power he had inside of him. He really brought it all the way. And that's something that is unique and remarkable.
So he talked about, and he often talked about this in public and in other podcasts, but one of the things that I found was that he found an inner peace. And you speak about that in your book, in your research, and in your writings, how do we tell listeners to go through some exercises to help them make those changes where they can find that inner peace?
Yes. I came upon a quote about a few days ago in preparation for this, and it really summarizes how Matt approached everything. Like, he came to my wedding in July of 2022, and he had just gone out of the hospital, right, from a surgery. He's like, oh, I had this procedure, and I'm great to be here. And like, literally, it was one line to the next that he was in surgery, and now he's on a plane to California from Buffalo to come to my wedding. No big deal. And the quote is this. It's by this Indian mystic named J. Krishnamurti. He says, "You want to know my secret? I don't mind what happens."
Wow.
And that's Matt, right? He didn't mind what happens. Like, it happened. Okay. Yeah. I have some lesions in my brain. Yeah, let's go. It wasn't like, let's go. It's just like, okay, yeah, well, I'm getting treatment on Tuesday, and then I'll play golf on Wednesday. It wasn't, he never, and that to me really was something. I was like, hold on, Matt, what did you just say? He said, oh, I was in the hospital for 6 days. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Wow, look at the weather. It's amazing. It wasn't like he put it down. He just like that. He didn't mind it. It was what was happening to him, and that was it. It wasn't laden with a lot of heavy emotion or sadness or making you feel like you had to hold space for him. He was always holding space for himself. And so to me, that line, he didn't mind what happened to him. And then he had this other thing, and that's what I think inner peace really is that alignment with what's happening to you outside of you, so that immediately, like in Matt's case, never a thing for him to align right away to what's happening, right? And he could immediately find joy in a moment, even in spite of whatever is going on with him. He didn't make it anything about what was happening outside of the actual facts, right? Like, one story I want to share with listeners is Father Peter, who did his funeral service, and he was talking about when he came in to see Matt in hospice, and Matt said, "Hey, guess what, Father Peter? I get to see Jesus before you do." And what I mean, who says that in hospice? Like this Father Peter's coming to minister to Matt, and Matt is in the moment happy to see his friend.
Yeah, he was, and the one thing, and thanks, Roy, that was beautiful, and one of the things that I observed was two things. One, it was never about Matt, like you mentioned, but he never viewed himself as a victim. And how is that important when you are dealing with the day-to-day? Because this could take you in a really dark place when you get this diagnosis.
Yeah.
So how can you help listeners figure that out in looking at Matt's life and how he did?
Yeah, Matt's a great example of what you just said. He never let himself be the victim. He always maintained responsibility, and that what I call responsibility, right? He always had the ability to respond in a moment to whatever was called upon him, and it never became something where he didn't have enough, what I would call, inner bandwidth. Like when you're on a computer, your computer has a certain bandwidth, and if it exceeds it, you slow down, right? For people who aren't computer savvy. But in Matt's case, his bandwidth for life was always bigger than the moment. And people, they call it, in the past, they would call it like, your shoulders are big enough to handle it. But in our terms, I call it bandwidth. So for Matt, he always had this bandwidth, so he never felt victimized by a moment. He was always bigger than that moment. And that's something that I actually looked up to him in that way. I was like, how is he maintaining that spirit? Yeah. How is he not defeated in this moment? And that, to me, I think that's part of victimization, is like, you acknowledge defeat. The moment is bigger than you. And in terms of what you just asked about people going into their final stages, you have stage 4 or whatever cancer or whatever disease you have, and your time is limited. Well, in reality, Bill, everybody's, nobody makes it out alive.
No, they don't.
So it's just about your perspective on that timeline. Now it went from, maybe 40 years to 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is. But the point is that it was never set in stone that you're going to live forever.
Well,
and I think understanding that as the first step is that, okay, I have new information. Now I'm going to try to make the best of it from what I can. I'm going to be sad. I'm going to be angry. I'm going to have these things come up. I'm going to have to mourn the life that I thought I was going to have, but I'm going to be present in the moment I have at the same time.
No, that's beautiful. And Roy, you're a master at wordplay. I will tell you that. But to prove your point, or kind of emphasize your point, and this is a tough part of our conversation for me to share, but I do want to share it because I think it's important. Matt called me, and he's on his way to hospice, and he told me that he was going to die. And I think that was at that moment that he realized that all of the medicines and all the wonderful doctors that have treated him and done an amazing job, you included, that his earthly life was going to come to an end. And I responded to him, and I don't know how it was, thank you, God, for giving me these words, but I said, Matt, we all are. It's just you're getting called to your eternal life earlier than we are. And then kind of fast forwarding, when I met with you the first time at the visitation, you told me that, Matt is with us and his soul is with us. And those were beautiful reminders to me that he is and that he will be. So I thank you for that. I do want to talk about mourning, and I do want to talk a little bit about sorrow. One of the things that I think our listeners can learn from is from me, and that I was probably negative in the sense of, I was like, gosh, Matt, how you have this diagnosis? How in the world are you denying the diagnosis? How can you carry yourself like that? And it was really hard for me to, and I'll use my words, get real, like Matt, and I think maybe expand upon that. And I felt guilty about it, but then I also was admiring Matt for his ability to stay present and stay in the moment and deal with this.
Bill, thanks for sharing that. I think a lot of people, even listening, felt that conflict within them about what Matt was doing with his perspective and what everybody else was doing with their perspective, right? So there's that dissonance. You're looking at someone that is going to leave his, I don't even call it die, I call it leaving the body, because you're a soul, right? You're
there you
a
go.
soul,
Perfect.
you live on. And he's out of his body, he's still a soul. I mean, that, everybody listening has their own spiritual tradition. So I'll just say it that way, is that,
100%.
You're going to heaven or whatever you want to call it, you're still around though. You're not in the body anymore. So that would be why I responded to you the way I responded to you in that moment at the visitation. But looking at that question of denial, I think that's a really interesting question, because people did come up to me. They're like, some people were like, oh, I wish he would have, been real. And I was like, he was real. It's his real,
Right.
It wasn't your real. Your real would be different. It doesn't mean that everybody has to go through the end of their life in the way Matt did, but he chose to see the positive. He chose to live in gratitude. And if you think about our own lives, you and me, Bill, and we make decisions sometimes that we're no one's perfect, right? So we always make these decisions based on what we think we're looking for in our goals in our life, right? So if he's deciding to see the positive and the gratitude in every situation, that's his right. And if you were around him, and you were, and I was, he did not allow anyone to live around him and that wasn't going to live in his reality, right? How powerful is that? It's almost like a star power, right? When you get around somebody that has that thing, like, whoa, he just didn't let it. And you may have other things going on in your mind, like, well, how is he doing this? Like, why is he coaching basketball? Shouldn't he be doing this? Shouldn't he be doing that? Like, why is he taking a trip? Why is he driving down to Boston? Why doesn't he stay here? He only has a year left with his family. Like all these things that we think, that's all our crap. That's
Right.
all our junk. And he's like, no, I don't need that, your junk projected onto me, and he wouldn't even allow that to happen. It wasn't out of anger. It wasn't out of like please don't talk about that around me. It's just how he lived. So when you're around that energy, so that I think is the example for all of us to take in that way. It's like, yes, there is a sadness, and there is, like we're going to talk about mourning, there's an aspect of that, but that's our mourning, right? That's our journey in that moment when you see someone on the other side that you think is going to die, quote unquote, when in fact we all are going to die. He's just short, just time period is shorter in the body. That's it. And so for him, he's like, every minute I've spent sad is 1 minute I'm not happy, in a way. That's kind of how he approached it. So I think that was his thing, and we can learn from it in that way. So to everybody who experienced that thought, like I did too, I was like, oh, he's going to Boston, that's 6 hours. He could stay here and get it at Roswell Park. No, he wanted to go to Boston and finish out his treatment there, and that's okay, right? That's his journey.
Yeah, right? He, I had the benefit of being with him for a week when he got some of his treatment, and it was, he would walk in and he, like you said, to use your words, Roy, he would project that, and I felt that when he was projecting that to his care team, when he was protecting it to the receptionist who was welcoming us in, and it was always about them. And I kind of, when I was able to speak at his funeral, and one of the things I said was, Matt never viewed himself as the main character in his own heroic journey. He always viewed himself as a collaborator in a massive, sprawling human epic. And that's really how I choose to remember his earthly life. And I think hopefully we can carry that on in our lives and project that. So thanks for reminding me of that and how beautiful that was and what a gift that was. So let's touch a little bit. I kind of glossed over the mourning part and the sorrow part, and which is natural for us as family, friends, and listeners to feel. How important is that? And I mean, there's no right, wrong way, but maybe expand upon that, because you really write about that a lot.
Sure. So I always come back to, what are you experiencing? So in terms of mourning, when you have a feeling in your body, if you don't feel it, it stays in your body. So that's how disease is caused in a lot of ways. We take things in, we don't let them go. We don't experience them. So in terms of mourning, anybody losing something, whether it's the loss of a future life that you thought you're going to have, or it's of a relationship, or if it's of your own life, or whatever it is, you have all these stages that come up, and they come up in whatever order they are. And in basic terms, we'll talk about like anger, sadness, denial, what they call bargaining, where you're like trying to mentally find more ways to, in his case, live longer, all those things. And, so there's all these things that come up, but the main ones I think I see people skip over, I call it emotional bypass, is the anger and the sadness. So if you do have that coming up for you, it's so important to acknowledge that that's there in you and then experience it. So if you're mourning the loss of somebody, it's really important to, and you feel that sadness, to let yourself feel it. And if you have to cry, you have to cry. If you have to lock yourself in a bathroom and do it, then do it. If you want to write, I have an exercise I give patients called burn pages, where you write. And then when you're done writing, you don't show it to anybody, you burn it. So you can write whatever you want down. Like, you can curse, you can swear, you can do whatever you want, and you don't have to show it to anybody. It's not just about mourning, though. It's about any emotion where you don't feel it's appropriate for whatever circumstance you have.
Yeah.
Right?
So, and I don't want to this is not a therapy session for Bill, but for me, it was, I struggled with, do I outwardly show this sadness, this sorrow, this anger? And I think, after talking with you, I think it really helped me let that go and
Yeah.
and let it be what it was going to be. And there's no, I thought it was, like you said, it was personal in the sense of your sorrow and your mourning of Matt and the loss of others. I mean, nobody's immune to this. Like you said, nobody gets out alive. And so we are all going to experience the loss of a deeply, someone we deeply loved.
Yeah.
So we kind of glossed over it, but I think it's a really important point about being present. And Matt always reminded his listeners to be present. And I think one of the examples, and I spoke of this kind of at his funeral, when he would meet a stranger, and he met a stranger, and how the impact that just that little meeting, and Roy, it might have been a 10-minute meeting, but this cancer patient, and I'm not going to divulge anything that shouldn't be divulged, but this cancer patient used Matt's words as inspiration to continue his journey and his healing path. And so how can we be present with others? And I know, and how important is that?
That's a great, these are all great topics. I mean, for me, that example you're talking about, I remember you shared it with me privately about how he approached each moment. He's always looking to serve. And I think really all of us are only really happy, really, really happy in our lives when we are doing something on purpose and we're serving. If you don't have both of those things, so not in your purpose and you're not serving in what you're doing, then you are not going to feel grateful for that moment because you think you should be somewhere else. You think you should be doing something different. So you have this judgment of the moment. So you're not able to live in gratitude, where the example you talked about, Matt's just sitting out there in the hallway and he sees somebody say, "Hey, how are you? What are you doing here?" And then, all of a sudden they're exchanging phone numbers on the hallway, and Matt's, just finishing his treatment that's not working anymore. He could have he could just have made it about himself. But in his mind, he's like, no, I'm here. And he didn't do it consciously even. I think it's just it became who he was. Like, I'm going to serve in this moment. This, this is my time. And, there's a great quote from Paramahansa Yogananda, is an Indian guru. He said that you change yourself, you change thousands. It doesn't mean you have to proselytize. Just by being somebody, just being more in that moment, as you said, being more present for what's there, you will change other people, because you're being somebody that is reflective of, if you're a Christian, you're reflecting Jesus in that moment. You're reflecting God in that moment. You're reflecting what is divine and what is good in that moment. And you can't help but change somebody. And you may not even know, right? But just like with Matt, I got to the funeral and people were like, "Oh, Matt told me about your book. I read your book." And I've 20-something people came up and told me that. Or I heard the podcast with Matt. Wow, it was so great. And had I not gone there, I wouldn't have known that, right?
Yeah.
But I was doing something that was on purpose for me by working with Matt, by helping and making and writing this book and doing this work. So that's on purpose for me. I didn't need to go to the funeral to know that I was doing good work. But when you find out later, you're like, this is good work. This is something moving forward. But you shouldn't need to know, you shouldn't need to know, get that sort of validation. Well, just know that it is true, though. Right?
Yeah, no, and Roy, I mean, obviously you're serving others, and that is a beautiful thing. There's another quote, and I think this is by someone much smarter than I. It says, "Resentment cannot enter a grateful heart." And you said that, Roy, by the way. I love that. That is a beautiful statement. And let's kind of unpack that and kind of expand on that. Resentment cannot enter a grateful heart.
Yeah. So resentment to me, and it's the reason why I know is because for a long time, I loved living in resentment, because I thought I should have more or whatever. And that's what resentment is, right? Is that resentment generally defined to me is, you think something that happened to you shouldn't have happened to you. It was in the past, but guess what? It's not in the past, because you haven't accepted that it's happened. So what happened when you were 16, when Mark put your head in the dumpster, you're still holding on to that moment where you're like, that shouldn't have happened to me. And you're just waiting for that day when you can get Mark back, whatever that moment may be for you. And think about it. Think about all those moments you have that you stored up that you're waiting to get that person back. That's resentment. And guess what that does? That puts you in a place of you haven't let the circle complete. You didn't let yourself feel angry and feel sad and then accept that is going to happen. And that is the last thing in mourning is acceptance, right? You have anger, sadness, resentment, denial, bargaining, and then acceptance. And so when we're talking about resentment, that's what we're talking about, is that something in the past that you believe shouldn't have happened to you happened, and it's wrong. So you're angry about it, or you keep holding on to a place of that judgment about that moment. And so when you have that, you're taking up space in your heart. Instead of having that space open for gratitude or for the flow of love or the flow of God, however you want to call that divine flow, you're taking up some space because it's still in you, right? That's what I was saying earlier, is like if you don't feel something, if you don't let something flow, it's stuck in you. And when we're talking about anger, that's in your heart. That's in your heart space. That's in that space where you're taking up space for yourself. So you can't feel gratitude. You can in that moment. So that's what I mean when I say resentment. You can't feel gratitude in that state because you don't have any space for it.
That's a great life lesson and really in forgiveness too. Forgiving yourself and kind of moving on to that. I find, and again, this is not about me, but I can only tell you my experiences. But I find that I get I become my own worst critic, and I'm maybe striving for perfection. And when I saw Matt was imperfect. He was human.
Yeah.
And how can we avoid that going down that negative path and becoming our own worst critic? And
I think also I'll give you a little break here, Bill, because I think it's cultural too, having perfectionism. There's a lot of cultures that get 24 weeks off a year, and they don't care what they're achieving. They're having a great time in their lives. So part of it is cultural. In our culture, we're looking to achieve. We're looking to plant our flag and go further, go faster, go farther, make more money, and do all these things. So that is our environment, and that environment's always acting on us 24/7. So even if you didn't decide to be a perfectionist, guess what? The world is going to try to make you into that place. So you got to remember the environment's acting on us 24/7, and we're only active when we're using our willpower. We're only active so it's less than 24 hours. So you're not going to win that battle in a way. So I'll take some of it's not all on you. It's not all part of you, right? So
good.
But there is that thing is like, are my goals actually in alignment with what happiness is for me? So you may have a goal and you may look to achieve something, and if you don't achieve it, you feel like you failed, right? And that's basically what perfectionism is the non-achievement, a mental non-achievement, and then the punishment for yourself that you didn't achieve it. And it's constant because guess what? None of us are perfect. None of us are gonna achieve. That's the whole point, right? Is that we're not perfect. So holding that unhealthy perfectionism. And look, I was raised by two physicians. Two physicians, and my dad said to me, he said, you can do anything you want after you finish medical school.
Right.
So I'm locked in for 25 years. So for me that was really it was hard to find any place where I was okay. So a lot of that work for all of us, I think, listening and for you and for me is that forgiveness, is that compassion of self. We're not here that long, man. We're not here that long. Every 100 years, everybody recycles on this planet. We're gone. We're nothing. We're gone. We're all halfway through. Pretty much everybody listening is way more than halfway through, So then it's like you have 20, 30 years left, or 40, or however you have. Anyway, it's going to end soon. So what are you going to do in that time? Are you going to live in the moment? Are you going to live in joy? Are you going to live in gratitude? Or are you going to be achieving goals that don't matter? Because guess what? There's no news article about you coming out tomorrow, right? It's just your own. right? It's just your own judgment of yourself.
Right.
And you're like, well, that day sucked. Did it? And that's why I add that gratitude practice. I call it 5 stars a day. Just write on a piece of paper. Re-feel what was good, whether you saw a butterfly, you felt the wind on your face, your wife made you laugh, or you saw something funny. Just write it down and feel that again, because your body doesn't know the difference between replaying a memory and feeling it in the moment. It just knows it's feeling something good, or conversely, feeling something bad. So choose the good one.
That's great. And you can, like you said, you can remind yourself of those wonderful experiences, and they don't have to be life-changing, but they are beautiful, and you can find gratitude in those in the experience, but also in reliving it when you write it down and read it and practice it. Roy, you've really touched on a lot of things, but I kind of want to hear a little bit about your exciting new venture and how that might help us learn more about ourselves and help us on our journeys. And could you tell the listeners a little bit about what you're doing now and the Institute?
Absolutely. So I'm creating a new course. It's called Healing After You're Cured. My book's called Healing Before You're Cured. It's primarily for people who have been through disease, especially cancer, using evidence-based techniques to help get you healthy. So in cancer, after Western treatment, whether it's chemotherapy, surgery, radiation, immunotherapy, you get your scans and you're done. They don't give you anything else to do. And the system doesn't account for you in that way. But guess what? You're leaving 20 to 30% recurrence rate decrease on the table by not improving certain things like your diet, exercise, mental wellness, stress reduction, spiritual wellness. There's a lot of research in those areas that isn't being reimbursed by insurances right now. But what I wanted to do was to create a platform, and that's what this is, Healing After Cured, where you get an intensive, take a 1-month course, and then go on an ongoing course where you can maintain these things and have accountability to improve your diet, to improve your exercise, improve your mental wellness, improve your ability to handle stress, and find the area where you're looking to work, right? So find that area, make that weakness into a strength, and you can use it for the rest of your life.
Well, isn't that what, I mean, and again, you've already talked a little bit about the 4 houses of health, but isn't that what your book, Healing Before You're Cured, wasn't that to create the habits to help you make the change? And is this new venture, is that more of kind of continuing down that path and building on that?
It is. I found that with the book is people read the book and were inspired, and then I've asked them what they changed, and they're like, oh, they got inspired, and they would take 1 or 2 things. But I found, like, for myself, it's good to have accountability. It's good to have a group and something to go forward. And I think that's something that I really, after experiencing Matt's passing and going to the funeral and seeing the effect of the work that he was doing through the work that we did, I said, I've been thinking about this course for a while. So finally I got back. I'm like, look, this is to honor Matt in a lot of ways. This is the work that I think everybody should be doing. And let's say we have, right now, there's about 1.5 million cancers being treated, life-threatening cancers. And out of that, 30%, we can prevent 30% of those recurrences. We're talking, so say 1.5 million, now we're going to get a little mathy here, 1.5 million people with curable cancers. We cure about 1.2 of them right now, but 30% of those 1.2 will recur. So you can drop that recurrence rate down by 30% if you do these things. And no one's forcing you to do it. That's the thing. They'll just set you back to your life. But one thing I found is that the life that you got is the life that created the situation that got you sick. So in a lot of ways, you have to take responsibility, like you said. You have to not be a victim in that moment. Say, you know what? Yeah, I did have a little bit of part to play. Maybe I should have dropped 20 pounds. Maybe I shouldn't be getting so angry. Maybe I should deal with that resentment. Maybe I should do some work on forgiveness. So this course gives you the permission to do it in those safe spaces.
That's beautiful. And I think, and you said it earlier, and I was I was really proud of Matt and as his older brother, when you said that, well, the first time we met, you said, I said, thank you for all that you've done to help Matt and educate Matt. And your words back to me were that, well, Matt taught me,
Yeah.
so for someone as learned and well educated and all have all the empirical data behind it to say Matt taught you, well, that's pretty cool.
It is.
So
it is because, I was sitting there and I go, man, why haven't I put this course out? I'm like, well, I don't know if anybody wants it. So I had this thought in my head that was stopping me, right? I go, do you think Matt would have just, no, he's like, so he started the podcast when he became stage 4. It's like, why would you, if you're being rational, why would you start something new when you're going to pass? But that's not how he thought. He's just like, I'm going to help people. I want to do this thing. I want to do this podcast. I'm going to do this. This is going to help a lot of people. I'm going to share my experience. And I just sat there. I go, well, you're not doing the exact same thing that you were helping him to do. That makes no sense. So you need to go ahead and move forward with what you're doing to honor Matt, but to honor yourself, to move forward in this work so you can put it out there and other people will be helped. And that's really what it's about, right? So to me, this course is honoring Matt more than anything else in the work of moving forward.
Well, Roy, and we're going to wrap up here pretty soon, but I really want to thank you for that message. And boy, I'm holding back tears, but they're tears of gratitude. Believe that. And please know that I'm just grateful for your friendship with Matt, your careful guidance with Matt. And now that we were able to reflect on his life and what a life of gratitude meant and what it can mean to all those listeners out there. I encourage all the listeners out there to read Roy's book, Healing Before You're Cured. It is a life-changing book, but please don't just read it. Please try to implement some of those wonderful life lessons into your life and incorporate those. And Roy mentioned having a 5-line gratitude journal each night. But Roy, as we close here, if there's any final thoughts on, Matt and his life and anything you'd want to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I would just say in the end too, and you can comment on this too, I think his integrity in that way he was living, it was real. It wasn't something he was doing just in front of other people. He was doing it all the time. And I think that integrity is really important for it to be real for yourself. Because if you're only doing it for show, whatever you're doing in your life, you'll know in the end that you're false. And that I think is the thing that really inspires people, is that integrity. And he had that, and that's something I aspire to too.
Well, I agree, and I witnessed that as well, and you articulated it so beautifully. Roy, I'm so grateful that we met through Matt and Mary. Your book has inspired Matt and many others to work on our 4 houses of health and find healing in our lives. While Matt certainly met many roadblocks, his dedication, focus, and work ethic and willingness to change helped his healing journey. There's no question. Roy, I know our listening audience will be inspired to draw from your knowledge, research, and your careful advice. I'm so inspired by your work that you have done and that you continue to do today. Our listeners, think about Roy's comments today and how you can incorporate those in your lives. There are 3 things everyone can do each day, and Matt always reminded us, and I'm going to close our episode here with those same 3 thoughts. Find the courage to be grateful for regardless of how powerful the storm is. Be truly present to those you are with. Pay attention to what you're feeding your mind, your body, and your soul. Again, our guest today was Dr. Roy Vongtama. For the listeners who enjoyed this show, please share it with your friends, comment, download it, and subscribe. With gratitude, Matt listeners, until the next time, find the courage to be grateful. Godspeed, my friends.